Today we are working Psalm 128. Now, Psalm 128 is one of the Ascension Psalms, or Songs of Degrees, and it's used for all kinds of wonderful purposes. And today we're going to use it for an interesting one. Today we are going to use Psalm 128 to live happily ever after. We're going to use Psalm 128 for a spell to live happily ever after. Now, living happily ever after doesn't mean that you never have any problems and that you never have a bad day, but it means that you live in the present moment and you live from success to success, from glory to glory, and you live in happiness as your primary state of being. So that's our goal today, to use Psalm 128 to live happily ever after. Now, the way we work Psalm magic is very simple and extremely effective. We take the psalm in question and we read it all the way through once without stopping. And then we go back through the psalm and we consider each and every verse. And we take all of those verses and we try to dig and search and hunt for hidden occult meanings within the psalm. We call those inner occult meanings magic seeds. And it's through this process of digging and hunting that we are, in effect, taking those magic seeds and planting them in our deep mind. And our deep mind is very fertile ground because those seeds, in a very real way, take root and grow, and they blossom forth, and then they bear fruit after their kind. And that's exactly what you and I are going to do together right now with Psalm 128. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, thy children like olive plants round about thy table. Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children, and peace upon Israel. It starts out with, blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord. So everyone that fears the Lord is blessed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no exclusions. You do not have to be initiated into a particular sect. You don't have to be a particular race or gender. Everyone is blessed that feareth the Lord. Now, fearing the Lord, we have to understand first who the Lord is. The Lord in the Psalms is the Tetragrammaton, and that represents for us infinite intelligence, the Godhead, the one power, the one source, and the one substance in all of the universe. There is only one, and it cannot be opposed. And that's why Psalm magic is so powerful, because we recognize and align with that one power, one with God as a majority. If God is for you, no one can be against you. So fearing the Lord doesn't mean being afraid of the Lord. It's a phrase that gets very misunderstood. Fearing the Lord means the ecstasy of God. That means that you have a visceral experience of the presence of God. Fear in this world always has some sort of pain attached to it. But that energy, if you took the pain out of it, it would be pure ecstasy. And the only thing that you can have that experience of is God, is the Lord. So that ecstasy, that feeling of the presence of God. So remember what that means, what the Lord means. Infinite intelligence, infinite soul, infinite spirit, infinite life, divine truth, perfect love, divine law. And so the infinite presence of that is what the ecstasy of God is, or the fear of the Lord is. So if you have that feeling of the presence of God, you are blessed. All you have to do is be willing to experience that feeling of the presence of infinite intelligence, and you are blessed. There is nothing else that is required of you, according to this psalm. And then it says, that walketh in his ways. So to walk in the ways of infinite intelligence means to be guided, to be led, and to live in the moment. The present moment is the closest thing to eternity that we understand here in this world. So living in the moment is how you are walking in the ways of God, or walking in the ways of infinite intelligence. So at every moment of time and point of space, you recognize, I am here to be guided. I am here to be led. Which way do I go? Which way do I turn? What do I say? What do I do? That's very similar to that injunction to become like a little child, or in Zen, to make your mind like an empty rice bowl, to have that beginner's mind. So you're walking in the ways of the infinite when you are in the present moment. Being in the present moment is being in eternity. It is being ever after. Now, if you are walking in the ways of the Lord in the present moment, and fearing the Lord, meaning in ecstasy, in the ecstasy of the presence of God, that means you're living literally happily ever after, right now, in the moment. For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. So living happily ever after doesn't mean that you're not going to work. Living happily ever after means that you are going to work, but your work, because you're being guided and led by infinite intelligence and living in ecstasy, your work only brings you good, only brings you prosperity. That's eating the labor of your hands, meaning that everything you do, the labor that you do because you are in the presence of infinite intelligence, being guided and led through that ecstasy, everything you do brings you prosperity. Everything you do brings you joy and happiness. You are successful. You can't help but be successful. Now, it says, thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house. When we deal with the Psalms, we deal with them magically, not religiously. So a magical interpretation of the Psalms means that every character in the Psalm represents a part of your mind. So your wife, in this sense, is the feminine side of your being, the feminine side of your mind. If you look on the tree of life, the crown is the top of the tree of life, and then spheres 2 and 3 are the mother and father, or in this case, the husband and the wife. And those represent two sides of one. There's no separation. It's not like you have two different gods. You don't have a god and a goddess that are separate. You have a single crown being worn by one side and then the other side, the male side and the female side. So that male and female is always within us. That's the mystery, the Hermetic mystery of gender. And I have a whole lecture on that you can go listen to. I may even have more than one, I can't remember. So your wife being as a fruitful vine by the side of thine house, if you think in terms of the masculine side of your mind is the decider side of your mind, the feminine side of your mind is your unconscious mind. So the masculine side of your mind is your conscious thinking. The feminine side of your mind is your deep mind, your unconscious mind. And that's the part of the mind that has all the power to bring about things. So what we plant with our conscious mind is then experienced as form and experiences in our lives. And that is born from the wife, the internal feminine part of ourselves, which is the same as the goddess and the god in the divine tree of life. So if you think about how in Genesis it says that humans were made in the image of their creator, that means that the tree of life represents your creator, but it also represents you. You have your very own crown and your very own father and your very own mother, God and goddess, inside your own mind, because you create just like God creates. So if you're working, going back to how it started, if you're being blessed by fearing the Lord and walking in the Lord's ways, meaning staying in the present moment and feeling the ecstasy of the presence of God, then you're going to be making choices with the conscious part of your mind, that male side of your mind. And then your wife, that female side of your mind, will only be fruitful, will only bring you good. And that's how you're living happily ever after. You're only planting seeds in the deep mind which bring about joy and happiness because you're being guided and led, and because you're living in the presence of infinite intelligence. Thy children, like olive plants, round thy table. So your children are the thoughts and the thought forms which are born out of the interaction of that masculine side of your mind and that feminine side of your mind. So your children are the thought forms that come out of that. The thought forms that come out of that are going to be like olive plants round about thy table. Olive plants represent nourishment and plenty. The olive tree in those Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures were considered life itself, were considered nourishment. If you had a fruitful olive tree about your table, that means you'll never go hungry. So your ability to use your mind in the way that's being taught to you in this psalm is to ensure your happiness, and also to ensure your security and your safety, and to make sure that you are always nourished and taken care of. Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. So it's reiterating there. So behold. Behold means to really take it in, to really get it, to really recognize what we just said. We just told you how to live happily ever after. That's what the psalmist is saying. So get this. Don't just gloss over this one. I'm repeating it for you here. This is how it works. You got to fear the Lord. And that, again, that doesn't mean being afraid of God. It means experiencing the ecstasy of the presence of God and walk in God's ways, meaning stay in the present moment, being guided and led every step of the way. That's how you're going to be blessed. So then it says, the Lord shall bless thee out of Zion. So you don't only have to always be in an exalted state of mind in order for these blessings to happen at all. You're going to be blessed every moment of time and point of space because you're constantly experiencing the ecstasy. You're constantly being guided and led, but you don't always have to be in meditation. You don't always have to be in that exalted frame of mind in order for that to happen. You can just be about your day and you're still being blessed. And thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. So in this sense, Jerusalem is the wider city or the totality of your consciousness. So the good of the totality of your consciousness is blessed. And that means that since you are working with the ecstasy of the presence of God and being guided and led, you're no longer making those mistakes. So you're staying in the flow of that magic so that all of Jerusalem, no matter where you are in Jerusalem, meaning no matter where you are in your consciousness, in your mind, you are constantly being blessed. And it says all the days of thy life. And this is the only place where these kinds of things happen other than fairy tales, forever, happily ever after. All the days of your life. It's a forever experience because what's forever? The present moment. And it started out with that. It started out really being clear that walking in his ways, that is the present moment. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children and peace upon Israel. So thy children's children, that means that your thought forms will give birth to their thought forms, which will give birth to their thought forms. In a very similar manner to how in the tree of life, there is overflow from one sphere to the next sphere, to the next sphere, to the next sphere, or in the hierarchy of angels, the archangels have their angels, which have their angels, which have their angels. It's just a natural flow. If you think about that 10 of cups from the real old Marseille decks, it looks like a champagne fountain. It comes from one cup to the next, all the way down. And that's what happens when we dedicate our minds to this process of fearing the Lord and walking in his ways, meaning feeling the presence of infinite intelligence and being guided and led and staying in the moment. Then no matter what, without even us having to do anything. Our thought forms will give birth to new thought forms, which will give birth to new thought forms, which will keep expanding our good onto infinity. And peace upon Israel is the outcome of that. Now, Israel is you. Israel is you. Now, I like to say Israel. And it's hearkening back to what we started with. Is Isis. That's the feminine side. That's the wife that it was talking about. Ra is the masculine side. That's the choosing part of your mind. So Ra is the masculine and Isis is the feminine. And El is the divinity of who you are. And that El is, in order to experience that divinity, you must have the fear of the Lord, as it's called in here, which simply means being present in that ecstasy. Being present in that ecstasy. Peace is on you forever and ever. That's what the outcome of doing this kind of work is. So you can see why this is one of the Ascension Psalms. This is very lofty, but it's also very practical because it's talking about how we can take all of that loftiness and turn it into an experience of happiness and joy and peace that is perpetual, that's not just fleeting, that doesn't come and go, that's constant. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So you can keep coming back to this psalm again and again, and then you'll get a sense that it's done and that you don't need to keep working on it. But this is a wonderful thought form for you to build, this idea of happily ever after. Give it a try. You're going to love it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you soon. Until next time, blessed be.